The moment Sarah Blackwell overheard her mother-in-law and her husband's mistress planning her murder, she had a choice: become their victim or become their worst nightmare. Standing frozen behind that kitchen door, for months pregnant with a secret that could shatter lives, Sarah realized the people who thought they were discarding her had just made the most catastrophic mistake imaginable. Because what they didn't know, what they could never have imagined, was that the quiet, obedient wife they'd spent 4 years breaking was worth $100 million. And she was about to take everything from them. If this story already has your pulse racing, hit subscribe now, because the next one goes even darker. And tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I want to know how far this story traveled. 4 years earlier, Sarah had walked into the Blackwell estate with a single suitcase, trembling hands, and a heart full of foolish hope. The mansion stood on the northern edge of Briarcliff Heights, white stone, towering columns, iron gates so tall they blocked out the sky when they closed. From the outside, it looked like safety, wealth, security. From the inside, it became her cage. She married Michael Blackwell believing she was stepping into love. What she stepped into instead was control, slow, methodical, disguised as protection. At first it was charming. "You don't need to work, Sarah. I'll take care of you. My family's particular. Just try to fit in. Your friends don't understand our world. You'll be happier without them." She believed him. Love makes a person flexible. Love makes warnings sound like concern. By the end of the first year, she had no job, no friends, and no family left returning her calls. By the second year, she had learned how to speak softly even when her chest burned with rage. By the third, she had learned how to disappear while standing in front of people. And by the fourth year, she had learned how to survive silently. Every morning began the same way. Evelyn Blackwell, her mother-in-law, ruled the house with a precision that bordered on military. Her footsteps struck marble like declarations of war. Her voice carried effortlessly, sharp and surgical. "Sarah, breakfast should already be laid out. Sarah, those curtains look cheap. Sarah, do you have a plan on giving my son an heir, or should I start looking for a replacement myself?" Sarah always answered the same way, soft smile, lowered eyes, compliance stitched into every word. "Yes, Mrs. Blackwell. Of course, Mrs. Blackwell. I'll fix it, Mrs. Blackwell." Michael never intervened. Not once. Most days he pretended not to notice. Some days, worse, he watched with mild amusement, as if her humiliation were background entertainment. Money became another leash. Every dollar Sarah spent required approval. Grocery receipts, pharmacy purchases, even personal necessities, scrutinized. If she asked why, Michael would tilt his head, smile faintly. "I just like to stay informed." The isolation was gradual, deliberate. Lies were planted. Conversations distorted. By the time Sarah realized her parents had stopped calling because they believed she didn't want them in her life, the damage was permanent. When loneliness became unbearable, she began speaking to the only place that never judged her. Hey, unborn children. Because 4 months ago, her world shifted again. She was pregnant. And not just pregnant. Pregnant with 3 lives. 3 heartbeats flickering on a monitor in a sterile exam room while the doctor stared at the screen in disbelief. "Triplets," the doctor had said carefully. "They are rare, but they are strong. So are you." Sarah had nodded, dazed. She left the hospital alone that day with shaking hands pressed to her stomach, holding a miracle she told no one about. Not her husband. Not her mother-in-law. Not even the nurses at the house. A voice inside her whispered one word over and over. "Wait." She didn't understand why, but for once, she listened. 2 weeks later, the whisper saved her life. It began with something small. Evelyn started leaving the house every Tuesday afternoon without explanation. Dressed sharper than usual, perfume heavier, phone locked. Each time Sarah asked where she was going, she received the same answer. "Out," Evelyn said flatly. The secrecy felt wrong. Uneven. Like the air before a storm. So the next Tuesday, Sarah followed her. She drove several cars behind, heart hammering, palms damp on the steering wheel. They crossed into downtown Riverton, turned down a narrow street dense with cafes and boutique shops. Evelyn parked in front of a quiet corner cafe with tinted windows. Sarah waited 30 seconds, then went inside through the back entrance. She saw them immediately. Evelyn was seated across from a young woman barely in her mid-20s, long brown hair, tailored jacket, posture confident. Their heads leaned close together, laughter light, conspiratorial. Between them on the table lay glossy magazines. Wedding magazines. Jewelry catalogs. The world tilted. Sarah slipped behind a wide concrete column near the back of the cafe and raised her phone just enough to record. Her heart was so loud she was certain someone would hear it. Then she heard the words that changed everything. "Once she's gone, everything gets simple," the young woman said casually, stirring her drink. "Michael won't have to pretend anymore." Evelyn laughed, pleased. Deeply pleased. "That girl was always temporary," she replied. "A placeholder. My son was meant for more." Sarah's knees weakened. They spoke freely after that, about divorce, about image, about replacing a wife as easily as replacing furniture, about summer weddings and future headlines, about how quickly people forget inconvenient women. Sarah left without being seen, but the truth followed her home. Michael was having an affair. His mother was orchestrating it, and Sarah was being erased. But even that wasn't the worst part. 3 nights later, nausea woke her near dawn. She slipped from bed quietly, padded into the dark hallway, descended the wide staircase toward the kitchen for water. She never made it. Voices drifted from beneath the closed door of Evelyn's private study, low, urgent. Michael's voice. "The insurance policy alone will pay out 7 figures." Sarah stopped breathing. "Are you sure it will look like an accident?" the younger woman asked, Natasha. The mistress's name finally revealed. Nervous excitement edged her tone. "I'm not going to prison for this." Evelyn's reply was calm. Confident. "The brakes fail on that hill every year. Rain, blind curve, no witnesses. Tragic. Clean." Sarah's vision blurred. "She always drives alone on Tuesdays," Michael added. "Next week is perfect. After that, it's over." Silence followed. Then laughter. Contained. Satisfied. Sarah staggered backward without a sound, retreated into the guest bathroom, locked the door, collapsed on the floor, and vomited until nothing but terror remained. They were planning to kill her. Not figuratively. Not emotionally. Physically. And they were smiling while they did it. 3 innocent lives inside her, marked for death by people she shared a roof with. For an hour she sat trembling, paralyzed by a single question. How does someone escape their own execution when the killers control the world around them? The police. No proof that would stand against the Blackwell name. Running. No money, no records, no allies. Confrontation. A death sentence. Then, at 3:07 a.m., her phone rang. Unknown number. Against every instinct, she answered. "Is this Sarah Blackwell?" a calm male voice asked. "Yes," she whispered. "My name is Thomas Avery. I'm an estate attorney. I've been trying to reach you for 6 months regarding your grandfather's will." Her grandfather. Michael had told her there was nothing left. No inheritance. No reason to attend the funeral. Michael had lied. "Mrs. Blackwell," the attorney continued, "your grandfather left everything to you. But there is a condition you need to understand immediately." Sarah closed her eyes as the storm finally revealed its other side. Her grandfather had seen Michael coming, and he had left her the weapon to destroy him. The silence on the line stretched after the attorney spoke, thick and disorienting. Sarah sat on the cold bathroom floor, back against the door, one hand pressed to her stomach as if the weight of the truth might crush her through the tiles. "Everything," she finally whispered. "Yes, Mrs. Blackwell," Thomas Avery replied evenly. "Your grandfather's businesses, properties, offshore accounts, private holdings, an estimated value just over $100 million. The number felt unreal. A fantasy figure. A cruel hallucination born from shock and fear. "My husband told me there was nothing," she said. "I know," Avery answered. "That was part of your grandfather's design." Her breathing slowed, not from calm, but from instinct. Survivor instinct. The same quiet force that had told her to hide her pregnancy, to follow Evelyn, to pause behind that study door. "Your grandfather suspected your marriage was strategic," the lawyer continued. "So he staged a public will 6 months ago. He left everything to charities. To the world, you were disinherited." Sarah closed her eyes. That was the week Michael's behavior had changed. The coldness. The sharper control. The sudden cruelty that no longer bothered hiding behind charm. "The real inheritance," Avery said, "is protected by a private clause. If you could prove, at any time, that your husband betrayed you, abused you, financially exploited you, or placed your life in danger, the estate transfers to you immediately. No delay. No contest." A tremor ran through her. They hadn't just failed the test. They had confessed to it out loud. "I have recordings," Sarah said, voice barely steady. "Of the affair. Of the murder plan." There was a pause on the other end, short, sharp. Then Mrs. Blackwell, Avery said quietly, "You are no longer in danger of being powerless." By sunrise, Sarah was driving east toward Riverton Financial Tower, hands steady on the wheel for the first time in hours. Michael didn't question her absence, barely registered it. Sexless distance had long replaced concern in their home. Avery's office occupied the entire top floor. Glass walls, hushed assistants, security at every entrance. Within 2 hours, forensic analysts confirmed the audio files were authentic. Timelines were mapped. Statements were prepared. Then came the second blow. "Your husband's company," Avery said, sliding documents across the table, "has been bleeding money for 3 years. Nearly $2 million siphoned through shell accounts. The mansion you live in, it was built with stolen funds." Sarah stared at the pages. Criminal ledgers. Falsified expenses. Offshore transfers. "And the land beneath it," Avery added, "belongs to your grandfather. Through a holding company, which now belongs to you." The room shifted. She owned the house they planned to kill her in. She owned the company Michael had been stealing from. And she owned the weapon they never saw coming. "You can destroy all of them legally," Avery said. "Publicly. Permanently." Sarah lowered her gaze to the faint curve of her stomach, 3 heartbeats hidden beneath silk and bone. "No," she said after a moment. "Not destroy. End." For the next 7 days, she played her role flawlessly. Obedient Sarah. Silent Sarah. Invisible Sarah. She accepted Evelyn's insults. Listened as Natasha's name slipped too easily into Michael's phone conversations. Ate dinners where plans for her own death passed inches from her plate. And all the while, the machinery of collapse turned quietly in the background. Bank connections activated. Board members notified. Shares transferred. Warrants prepared. Tuesday approached. The day they meant to erase her. The day she chose to erase them instead. Tuesday arrived calm and cloudless, one of those cruelly beautiful mornings that betrayed nothing of what it carried beneath its blue sky. Sarah woke before dawn. Michael was already up, moving through the bedroom with unusual purpose. He kissed her cheek for the first time in months, soft, deliberate, rehearsed. "Drive carefully today," he said. She nodded, docile as ever. "Yes, Michael." Evelyn lingered at the breakfast table, coffee untouched, gaze sharp as glass. When Sarah reached for her purse, Evelyn's lips curved faintly. "That hill gets slick after the rain," she said lightly. "Be cautious." Sarah felt the words slide across her skin like ice. An hour later, she did not drive toward the grocery store. She drove toward the Horizon Hotel, checked into a private suite under an assumed name, and locked the world behind her. Then she made one final call. "It's time," she said. The first collapse hit at precisely 10:02 a.m. Michael arrived at his office expecting a board vote on quarterly performance. Instead, he was met by security and a sealed termination notice. "No meeting today, Mr. Blackwell," the guard said evenly. "You've been relieved of your position effective immediately." Michael tried to laugh at first, then threatened, then demanded. By the time the chairman slid the evidence across the table, ledgers, wire transfers, internal audits, his face had drained of color. Criminal charges were filed before noon. His bank accounts were frozen before he reached the parking garage. And his name hit the financial news before he made it home. At 11:17 a.m., a courier delivered Evelyn's eviction notice. 30 days. No appeal. Ownership transferred to a private holding company. Her credit cards declined within minutes, every single one. Evelyn screamed until her voice broke. At 12:03 p.m., Natasha disappeared. One text. One sentence. "You're ruined. Don't contact me again." Sarah watched it unfold from the quiet of her hotel suite, one update at a time, emails from Avery, phone calls from assistants, headlines stacking like falling dominoes. And still, she waited. Because collapse wasn't justice. Exposure was. By late afternoon, Michael finally realized something was wrong with the plan. Sarah hadn't gone shopping. Her phone rang once. Twice. 10 times. By evening he was in his car, driving toward the route where her brakes were meant to fail, searching the roadside like a man hunting a ghost. Instead, he found nothing. No wreckage. No ambulance. No body. Only silence. And for the first time in his life, fear. That night, Sarah stood at the window of her suite, city lights trembling below. Her hand rested on her stomach. "They missed," she whispered. 3 heartbeats answered. But she wasn't finished. Not yet. Because the world still believed Michael Blackwell was a betrayed businessman. The world did not yet know he was a would-be murderer. And that truth would fall in public. By morning, Michael Blackwell was no longer a powerful executive. He was a man unraveling. He went first to the hospitals. Not from concern, not from guilt. Panic drove him. If Sarah had crashed, if she had survived, evidence would surface. He needed to know what had gone wrong. At the third emergency ward, a nurse finally recognized his name. "Mr. Blackwell," she said cautiously, scanning her screen. "There's no patient here by that name." Relief flickered through him, short-lived. Because as he turned to leave, a familiar voice called out from behind a partition. "Michael!" He froze. Dr. Eleanor Pierce, Sarah's obstetrician, stepped into view holding a chart. Surprise softened her features. "I thought you'd want to know. Sarah's pregnancy is progressing beautifully. Triplets are always high risk, but she's incredibly strong." The word slammed into him. "Triplets? What?" he whispered. Dr. Pierce's expression shifted. Too late. Realization struck her face. "Oh," she said softly. "She didn't tell you." Michael stumbled backward as though struck. Triplets. Not one. 3. 3 lives he had signed off on with a murder plan. 3 children he had tried to erase without ever knowing they existed. By the time he returned to the estate, his hands were shaking. That was the moment the search began. He called Sarah's phone until the number disconnected. He drove to her parents' old address, the address he himself had severed years earlier. They met him at the door like strangers. Cold. Guarded. "She hasn't spoken to us in years," her mother said quietly. "You made sure of that." The words burned. He went back to the mansion at dusk to find half the staff gone, their final checks already issued. The gates no longer responded to his access code. Ownership had changed, and no one was required to explain it to him. Meanwhile, Sarah Blackwell no longer existed in public records. Under Avery's instructions, her medical files were sealed. Private security rotated silently at her locations. Her transfers were untraceable. Every hospital network in the state carried one directive. Michael Blackwell is not authorized to receive any information regarding her or her pregnancy. 6 months passed. While Michael deteriorated, selling assets, begging former allies, dodging investigators, Sarah rebuilt. She gave birth in a private medical wing overlooking the coast of Montecito Bay, 3 cries cutting through dawn as if life itself were declaring victory. 2 boys. 1 girl. Perfect lungs. Perfect hearts. She named them quietly, steadily, without ceremony. And then she went to work. She took control of her grandfather's corporations, purged corrupt executives, restructured supply chains, exposed hidden fraud. The empire doubled in value in under a year. She built a foundation for women fleeing abuse, emergency housing, financial aid, legal defense. No interviews. No public speeches. Only results. And all the while, Michael searched. For 6 months, he hunted a woman who no longer lived in the world he controlled. But she had not vanished forever. Only long enough to choose the stage for his final fall. The invitation arrived without warning. Thick ivory card, embossed lettering, sealed with dark blue wax. The Blackwell Foundation inaugural charity gala benefiting. Women in Crisis and Recovery hosted at the Asterix Grand Hall. Michael held it in his hands for a long time, staring at the name as if it might rearrange itself into something harmless. Blackwell. Not his foundation. Not his money. Not his world. Whispers had already followed it through social circles. A new benefactor. A mysterious CEO. A shadow investor whose companies had doubled in value in less than a year. Whoever she was, she had stepped into the vacuum he left behind and claimed it with precision. He didn't know yet that the foundation was built from the wreckage of what he had tried to destroy. Across the city, Sarah stood motionless as her stylist fastened the final clasp at the back of her gown. Cream silk draped over her shoulders, cut with quiet authority rather than spectacle. Her reflection barely resembled the woman who once bowed under Evelyn's voice. Her posture had changed. Her eyes, sharper now, steady, unflinching. 3 nannies waited in the adjoining room. 3 infants slept beneath soft blankets. 3 breaths in perfect rhythm. "They are ready whenever you are," the head of security said gently. Sarah inhaled slowly, one hand brushing the soft curve of her daughter's cheek. "Tonight," she said, "they see their legacy begin." The Asterix Grand Hall glittered as the city's elite arrived, silk, diamonds, tailored arrogance moving beneath crystal chandeliers. Reporters lined the red carpet. Camera shutters flared like incense. Michael entered unnoticed at first. His suit was well cut but worn thin at the confidence. The weeks had hollowed him out. Financial ruin, legal pressure, Natasha's disappearance, Evelyn's unraveling rage. He no longer looked like a man who owned the world. He looked like a man who had lost it. Beside him, Evelyn clung to her pearls like armor. Her friends no longer spoke to her. Her accounts were empty. But pride still hardened her spine. They had come for one reason. To beg. To plead. To find the woman who had taken everything and claw back even a fraction. Then the lights dimmed. The host stepped forward. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced warmly, "thank you for attending this historic evening. Tonight we celebrate not just philanthropy, but survival. Please welcome the founder and primary sponsor of the Blackwell Foundation." A pause. Ms. Sarah Blackwell. The doors opened. The room fell silent. Sarah entered with 3 nannies flanking her, each holding a child. Camera flashes erupted. Whispers surged like wildfire. Michael's breath left his body in a sound that wasn't quite human. She was alive. Not broken. Not hidden. Radiant with controlled fire. Evelyn made a strangled sound. Sarah crossed the floor with measured steps until she stood beneath the chandelier's brightest blaze. The crowd parted without being asked. Michael pushed forward, hands trembling. "Sarah," he rasped. "You're alive, those children." She turned to him slowly. "Not a word," she said softly. The room stilled. "These," she continued, her voice carrying without strain, "are the children you paid $500 to erase. The children you planned to murder without ever knowing their faces." Gasps tore through the hall. Michael staggered. Evelyn surged forward in panic. "She's lying." Sarah lifted one hand. The screens lit behind her. Audio filled the room. Michael's voice. Natasha's laugh. Evelyn's calm instructions for murder. Silence collapsed into chaos. Police moved in from every aisle. Hands seized shoulders. Cuffs snapped shut. Michael's knees buckled as his world finally shattered in full view. Sarah stepped closer, her voice for him alone. "You believed I was nothing," she said. "You built your end on that belief." Then she turned away. And the world watched justice take its final breath. The ballroom emptied in layers of shock. Some guests fled as if disaster were contagious. Others lingered at the edges, frozen in place, witnessing the final unraveling of 2 names that once ruled their world. Michael was dragged past rows of staring faces, his hands cuffed behind him, his mouth opening and closing as if words might still save him. Evelyn fought harder, shrieking, twisting, invoking lawyers who no longer returned her calls, invoking power she no longer possessed. Sarah did not watch them leave. She stood still at the center of it all, one hand resting lightly on her daughter's blanket, listening to the echo fade. When the last echo died, silence returned to the hall. Applause followed. Slow at first. Uncertain. Then it spread. Not for spectacle. Not for revenge. For survival. By morning, the arrests were everywhere. Headlines stacked across screens. Heir to Blackwell Empire arrested in murder plot, socialite matriarch facing conspiracy charges, affair, fraud, an attempted homicide revealed at charity gala. Every detail surfaced: embezzlement timelines, shell accounts, Evelyn's financial complicity. The recordings were authenticated within hours. Warrants expanded. Additional charges were added. Natasha was the last domino to fall. She was pulled from a luxury apartment 2 cities away, her name already poison online. Her parents' home was seized through back taxes uncovered during the investigation, quietly purchased months earlier by a holding company tied to Sarah's network. By nightfall, Natasha vanished from public life. By the end of the week, the case belonged to the state. Michael cracked first. Interrogation did what power never could. It emptied him of illusion. The executives he once blackmailed testified. The assistants he once threatened spoke freely. His own financial trail buried him deeper with every disclosure. Evelyn held out longer. Pride made her reckless. She denied everything until the final evidence was played in court. Her voice, unmistakable, instructing her son how to kill his wife without leaving a trace. That recording ended her defense. The trial moved quickly. There was too much proof. Too many eyes. Too much public fury for it to rot in delay. Michael accepted a plea. 5 years in federal prison for fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy to commit murder. Evelyn was convicted as an accomplice. 3 years. No early release. When the sentences were read, neither looked at Sarah. But she looked at them, and there was nothing left between them. Not hatred. Not vindication. Only closure. While the world obsessed over the fall of the Blackwells, Sarah quietly returned to what she had built. The foundation's applications tripled within 72 hours. Women arrived with children, with bruises hidden beneath long sleeves, with empty wallets and terror in their eyes, and left with resources, protection, lawyers, homes. She expanded the board, opened 2 shelters, funded emergency medical care for survivors who had nowhere to turn. Her companies flourished without cruelty driving them. Profits grew without stolen blood beneath them. And every night, when the world finally fell silent, she held her children. 3 breaths. 3 proofs that death had failed. Michael wrote from prison once, a letter delivered 3 months after sentencing. He spoke of regret, of confusion, of betrayal. She never opened it. Evelyn never wrote. Pride had finally starved. Natasha was last spotted changing her name in a distant county, a move that fooled no one. Their world had collapsed completely. Quietly. Thoroughly. Exactly as Sarah once had. The world eventually moved on. It always did. The scandal that once devoured every headline softened into footnotes, then into case studies, then into trivia whispered at parties by people who had never truly understood what had been lost or saved. But inside Sarah's world, time moved differently now. Mornings began with soft chaos, 3 cribs, 3 voices learning how to exist. Warm bottles at dawn, lullabies at dusk. The weight of exhaustion mixed with a deeper weight she carried willingly, the responsibility of having chosen survival when death had been carefully scheduled for her. She had escaped, but she had also become something else. A guardian. The Blackwell Foundation expanded beyond anything she had first imagined. Regional branches became national. National became international. Quiet partnerships formed with hospitals, legal networks, trauma researchers, relocation services. Women didn't just run anymore. They rebuilt. And every structure Sarah created carried a single unspoken rule. No woman would ever have to beg to be believed again. She rarely gave interviews. When she did, she spoke with restraint. Not about vengeance. About preparation. Predators depend on disbelief, she said once. And on the assumption that their victims are alone. She never was again. Sometimes, in the quiet moments between meetings and motherhood, memory returned uninvited. The kitchen door. The voices that believed she was already dead. The moment that had split her life cleanly into before and after. But memory no longer came with terror. Only clarity. She had not survived because she was lucky. She had survived because she had listened. And then she had prepared. Years later, Michael was released from prison into obscurity. A man no one waited for. A name no door opened for. He worked under aliases, drifted between jobs that never lasted, carrying the permanent stain of a crime too quiet for sympathy and too public for forgiveness. He never saw her again. Evelyn died 2 years after her release. Alone in a rented room, estate already liquidated, power finally irrelevant. Natasha remained a shadow, changing names, faces, cities. A woman running from every mirror that remembered her. None of them were hunted. They simply disappeared. Which was its own sentence. One evening, long after the world had grown quiet again, Sarah stood on the balcony of her hillside home, city lights stretching beneath her like stars fallen to earth. Her children slept behind her. 3 lives that began with a death sentence whispered behind a kitchen door. She had not just survived that night. She had rewritten its ending. And the legacy it failed to erase now breathed softly in the next room. Night folded gently over the hills. The city below shimmered like a living constellation, movement without intimacy, light without warmth. From the balcony, Sarah watched it without longing. Once, that world had been everything. Approval. Status. Security built on glass. Now it was only distance. She turned back inside. The house was quiet in the way only safe places ever were. Not empty, protected. Soft monitor lights glowed in the nursery hall. 3 steady rhythms rose and fell in the dark, synchronized like a promise the world could no longer touch. She stood in the doorway for a long moment. Then she closed it. In her office, tucked behind shelves of unremarkable business books and framed foundation certificates, lay the last thing no one else had ever seen. A simple slim folder. Inside it, documents never filed, companies never activated, contingency plans never deployed. The final layer of preparation she had never needed to use. The part of her plan that would have activated only if everything had failed. Poisoned escape routes. Secondary identities. Offshore accounts that would have vanished her completely. No rescue. No justice. Only disappearance. That had been the version of herself prepared to die quietly so her children could live somewhere else under other names. She closed the folder gently and locked it away. That woman no longer existed. Years earlier, long before the gala, before the arrests, before the public collapse, Sarah had learned something the conspirators never realized. They believed they had found her weakest point. Pregnancy, isolation, dependence. They never imagined it was the moment she stopped being expendable. They never imagined the weeks she spent listening, collecting, testing every lie against every ledger, every transaction against every phone record. They never recognized what preparation looked like when it moved silently instead of violently. They believed planning a death gave them power. They never questioned who was planning faster. The knock at her door came softly. "A caretaker. Your daughter's awake." Sarah nodded, rising immediately. The nursery light was dim, warm. One small hand rose in the air as she entered, reaching blindly for familiarity. Sarah lifted her gently, feeling the quiet weight against her chest. "She looks like you," the caretaker said with a small smile. Sarah didn't answer. She no longer believed in resemblance. Only in continuity. There would be no autobiography, no documentary, no long-form confession. The world would never fully understand how easily everything could have ended differently, or how narrow the margin had once been between legacy and erasure. The public believed the story ended at the gala. They were wrong. It ended here, in the ordinary miracle of breathing, in the quiet defiance of survival without spectacle, in the fact that the children slept without knowing how close they had come to never existing. Michael never learned why his final holdings collapsed 3 months before the recordings surfaced. He assumed market volatility. It had been orchestration. Evelyn never understood why her private accounts were frozen days before the gala. She blamed banks. It had been timing. Natasha never understood how investigators found her before she could flee again. She blamed betrayal. It had been positioning. They all believed the end began at the gala. They never saw how far back it truly started. Sarah placed her daughter back into the crib and stood watching until sleep reclaimed her again. For a moment, she allowed herself to remember the woman behind the kitchen door. Frozen. Invisible. Disposable. The woman they thought they could erase. That woman no longer needed forgiveness. She had been replaced by someone else. Someone who did not mistake silence for weakness. Someone who understood that monsters never expected their victims to study them. The balcony doors remained open as dawn approached. Light crept slowly over the city. Another day began without their permission, without their control, without their names. Sarah stood in the quiet threshold between past and future, no longer hunted by either. The people who once planned her death now existed only as case numbers, forgotten headlines, archived court footage, less permanent than the lives they failed to erase. And the last thing they never knew, the final truth that never reached them, was that Sarah had never wanted revenge. She had only wanted the right to finish the life they tried to cancel. And she had taken it,